Chapter 1: The Mysterious Signal. Night had fallen over the suburbs of Chicago. A light mist covered the empty streets, and the windows of the houses reflected the cold glow of the streetlights. Luke Harris sat in his garage, where a homemade telescope was pointed toward the endless dark dome of the sky. His hands nervously fidgeted with the buttons on the computer, which connected the receiver to the antenna on the roof. He never slept until late at night, but tonight he felt that something special awaited him in the vastness of space. What could it be? Luke thought, pressing another combination of keys. A signal graph appeared on the screen. Strange oscillations, unlike any known radio frequencies or astronomical phenomena. "This is not just noise," he whispered to himself. His heart pounded faster, and his palms were covered in cold sweat. He was used to strange signals, from radio bursts to cosmic static, but this signal had something alive about it, as if he could feel it by touch. He called Sarah, his colleague from the university observatory. "Sarah, you will not believe this. I just received a signal. It's unusual." "Another late-night anomaly, Luke?" she asked sarcastically, though curiosity was evident in her voice. "Let me hear it." They connected via video call, and Luke showed the graph on the screen. Sarah leaned closer to the monitor, scrutinizing the chaotic oscillations. "This is impossible. No known source. And the frequency, it changes on its own. Luke, this is something incredible." John, the third member of their small team, joined the conversation. "If this is not a natural phenomenon," he said thoughtfully, "then perhaps someone is deliberately transmitting the signal? But who and why in the middle of the night?" Luke felt a surge of anxiety in his chest. He pressed a few more buttons, increasing the receiver's sensitivity. The signal became clearer. It seemed to whisper something, but the words were unintelligible, like a code that was just beginning to unlock. He decided to do what he had avoided before, record the signal onto his hard drive to analyze it later. The next morning, Luke felt a strange sensation in his body, a light dizziness and a feeling that someone was watching. He called Sarah. "Sarah, I haven't slept. The feeling is strange." "Are you kidding?" she laughed. "Maybe it's just fatigue, but don't ignore it. Luke, I feel something unusual too." They agreed to meet at the observatory to analyze the signal together. Luke and Sarah arrived at the old observatory on the outskirts of the city. There, among dust, old telescopes and computers, they began their work. "I think the signal affects the brain," she said quietly, reviewing the wave and frequency graphs. "Luke, look at these anomalies. This is not just cosmic noise." "I feel it myself," Luke replied. "Headache, slight dizziness. Maybe we are coming under its influence ourselves." John joined a little later, bringing coffee and news. "I don't want to scare you, but this morning, 2 of our colleagues didn't show up for work. They simply disappeared. No one knows anything." Luke's heart tightened. He stared at the screen, thinking that the signal might be linked to their disappearance. Tension filled the observatory. They didn't know what to do, report it to the authorities, or continue their own investigation. Every passing moment could be decisive. Luke decided to take a risk and listen to the signal in real time, trying to decipher at least part of it. When they turned on the amplifier, the room filled with a low hum that seemed alive. The graphs from the screens danced chaotically, and the air felt as if it had tightened. "This is extraordinary," he muttered, clenching his fists. "But I'm afraid we still don't know what it is doing to us." Sarah leaned closer to him. "Luke, we must act cautiously. If the signal really affects consciousness, we are only at the beginning." As they spoke, the computer began to automatically record data into new files. Only after a minute did Luke realize that the signals seemed to learn from each of their movements, adapting to their brainwaves. "So it reacts to us?" Sarah whispered. "Yes," Luke replied in a cold voice. "And if this is only the beginning, we may not be able to cope." A silence fell over the astronomer's dark room. Outside, the night was calm, but inside, a new threat began to take shape. Silent, invisible, capable of changing the lives of anyone who heard it. Luke realized that from this day on, his life and the lives of his friends would never be the same. The signal from space was not merely a scientific mystery. It was the first harbinger of a catastrophe approaching from the boundless depths of the universe. Chapter 2: The Disappearance. The morning in Chicago was gloomy. The mist that hung over the city had not yet lifted, and the sounds of cars seemed muted, as if someone had covered the city with a blanket of silence. Luke Harris, still excited and frightened after the night's study of the signal, descended the stairs to his kitchen, where hot coffee awaited. His hands trembled, and his eyes could not leave the phone. "2 more messages from the university," he muttered, reading them. Colleagues did not show up for work. Sarah arrived a little later, and together they decided to go to one of the places where the missing people were last seen. Luke felt a chill down his spine. His intuition screamed that the signal was connected to the disappearances. "Luke," Sarah said quietly, "if the signal affects consciousness, what if they didn't just disappear? What if they are under its control?" Luke did not answer immediately. His mind tried to find a logical explanation, but only terrifying scenarios swirled through his head. John arrived in his car, and the 3 friends set off toward the laboratory where the missing had conducted their last experiments. The streets seemed deserted. Every sound echoed off the walls of the old buildings, creating the sensation that the city itself was watching them. The laboratory was empty. Computers were on, but the monitors flickered chaotically, displaying strange symbols reminiscent of the code they had seen in the signal. On the tables were cups of half-finished coffee, scattered documents, and on the floor, traces of a hasty exit. "They just disappeared," John whispered. "No," Sarah interrupted. "There is something else. Look at these graphs, the signals. They were reacting to someone among them." Luke leaned over one of the computers. On the screen were brainwave patterns unnatural for normal human brain activity. The signal they were receiving from space seemed to connect to them, altering behavior and thoughts. "This is incredible and terrifying at the same time," Luke said. "They can control people's minds, and we are only at the beginning." As they spoke, John received a text message. His eyes widened. "Luke, Sarah, another colleague has just disappeared. He wrote that he feels strange whispers in his head." Then the message abruptly ended. Silence filled the laboratory. Each of the friends felt a slight tremor, as if the signal was already affecting them. Luke realized that time was running out. If they did not find a way to block or decode the signal, the disappearances would continue and the scale of the catastrophe would grow. They decided to split up. Luke and Sarah drove to the observatory to try to increase the antenna's power and track the source of the signal. John stayed in the laboratory to gather data from the computers of the missing. During preparations, Luke felt a headache and a strange ringing in his ears. His vision blurred slightly, and his heart raced faster than usual. Sarah noticed his condition and stopped him. "Luke, we cannot take risks. The signal is stronger than we thought." They connected a new amplifier and pointed the antenna toward the source. on the screens appeared new waves, more intense and clear. Luke felt a chill run through his body, and for a second it seemed as if the air around them was compressing. "This is not just a signal," he muttered. It's a warning." Sarah reviewed the data and realized that the signal learns and adapts to each new brain that catches it. "If we do not act quickly," she said, "this could end in tragedy, and not just for us." At that moment, Luke heard a strange sound from the street, as if someone was whispering his name. He turned, but the empty streets showed no movement. His heart pounded, and the feeling of fear was turning into panic. "We have to stop this now before it's too late," Luke whispered. Sarah nodded. They both knew that their struggle was only beginning. The signal from space would not stop, and the disappearances and mysterious whispers were only the first manifestations of what awaited the city. Over Chicago, the mist began to dissipate, but inside Luke and Sarah, a new kind of darkness prevailed, an invisible enemy capable of penetrating human consciousness. They felt that the next step could be decisive, and the city had no idea yet that danger was already among them, silent and unseen, waiting for the moment to reveal itself in full. Chapter 3. Intercepting the Signal. Dark night had once again fallen over Chicago. The streetlights flickered through the light mist, creating the sensation of being watched from every corner. Luke Harris and Sarah stood on the observatory roof, adjusting the antenna to receive the signal. Their fingers moved quickly over the keys, and their eyes never left the flickering monitors. "Luke, look!" Sarah exclaimed. "The waves are getting stronger. They're almost alive." Luke leaned in, carefully studying the graphs. The waves constantly changed shape, as if the signal was watching them, adapting to their brain activity. "This is more than just a cosmic signal," he said, pressing his lips together. "It interacts with people. Everyone who hears it changes." Suddenly, John's computer in the laboratory lit up with a red warning. Luke and Sarah immediately connected remotely. On the screen, messages flickered. One by one, observatory staff were disappearing, their last actions recorded as chaotic signals on the monitors. "They're disappearing faster than we thought," Sarah whispered, feeling a chill run down her spine. "And the signal seems to be training them." Luke nodded. His eyes flashed with determination. "We have to intercept it. If the signal remains uncontrolled, the consequences will be catastrophic." They activated a special amplifier and aimed the antenna toward the source. The waves became even more intense, and Luke felt a rising noise in his head, his heart pounding faster. Sarah noticed his vision slightly blurring and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Luke, do you feel it? The signal is affecting us too." They quickly adjusted the filters, trying to separate the clean waves from those influencing the brain. The first results were astonishing. The signal generated short pulses that altered people's emotions and reactions to certain stimuli. "It's like remote programming," Luke said. "They become controlled by the signal, but we can still intervene." Suddenly, Sarah noticed movement in the darkness of the street below the observatory. Someone was watching them. "Luke, someone is there," she whispered. They carefully descended from the roof, hiding in the shadows, and approached the source of the movement. Luke raised a small portable wave detector, and the reading immediately spiked. "This is a consciousness-influencing signal, and it's not just from space. Someone is amplifying it here on Earth." The movement drew closer. From the shadows emerged a figure, one of the missing colleagues. His eyes were empty, his movements mechanical. "Luke, Sarah, help me," he said, but his voice sounded unnatural, almost alien. Luke and Sarah realized the signal doesn't just make people disappear, it takes their consciousness. Those it touches become puppets. "We can't leave it here," Luke said.
If it takes control of one of our friends, we won't be able to save them anymore." They quickly connected the portable amplifier and began sending counterwaves. The signal fought back, like a living organism, and for a moment it seemed the antenna might overheat. Luke felt a sharp headache, and Sarah barely restrained her panic. "Hold on!" she shouted. "We've almost blocked it." And then something strange happened. The colleague approaching us with empty eyes stopped. His movements became chaotic, then he collapsed to the ground, as if the signal no longer controlled his body. "We did it," Sarah whispered, barely breathing. "But it's only temporary." Luke nodded. They knew the signal learns and adapts. Every new attempt to interfere makes it stronger and more unpredictable. "If we don't find the source and stop it completely," Luke said, "the city will be lost." They climbed back onto the observatory roof, looking at the night city flickering in the distance. The silence was deceptive. Luke felt that every sound could be a signal watching them. "We're only at the beginning," he said, "and the enemy is already among us." Once again, the lights on the streets went out, as if the city itself sensed the danger. Luke and Sarah knew the fight against the signal would be long, dangerous, and unpredictable, and the next move could cost them their lives.
Chapter 4. Internal Infection. The morning light barely pierced through the heavy Chicago fog. Luke, Harris, and Sarah sat in a small laboratory that seemed insulated from the city, yet tension never left their minds. The events of the previous night had left a deep mark. Their missing colleague was no longer himself, and the signal that penetrated consciousness remained elusive and unpredictable. "We have to act fast," Luke said, flipping through the antenna logs. "If the signal starts spreading among people in the city, it won't be stoppable." Sarah nodded. She felt a slight nausea and trembling in her fingers, perhaps the first signs that the signal was affecting them as well. "Luke, I feel a strange warmth in my head. Sometimes it feels like I hear the voices of those who are already gone," she whispered. Luke froze for a moment, his heart clenched with fear. "These aren't just hallucinations," he said. "It's the signal. It's testing us, studying our reactions." Suddenly, the phone on the table rang, and a number appeared on the screen, one of their missing friends. "Luke, help!" The voice sounded muffled, alien and yet familiar at the same time. I can't." Luke and Sarah realized that the signal had begun to seize their friends remotely. There was no physical contact, yet the influence was deep and psychological. "We have to plan," Luke said, entering observation coordinates. "We can't just wait." They set out for the block where several people had recently disappeared. The city appeared deserted, but the silence was deceptive. Every sound seemed threatening, and the sensation of being watched grew stronger. "Sarah, do you feel that?" Luke asked, raising his hand. "I think we're not alone." Suddenly, a figure appeared on the narrow street. At first, it seemed familiar, their former colleague Jonathan, but his eyes were empty, movements mechanical, and an unnatural smile frozen on his face. "Jonathan," Sarah whispered, barely keeping panic at bay. They are here," he rasped, but the voice was not his own. "Don't come closer." They realized that the signal not only altered consciousness, but turned people into instruments of its spread. Jonathan began moving towards them like a puppet. Luke pulled out a portable pulse emitter and aimed it at Jonathan. Minutes felt like eternity. The colleague's body twitched, then collapsed to the ground, but his eyes remained empty. "We saved his body, but not his mind," Sarah whispered, looking at him. "And there will be more people like this." Luke nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. They had to find the source of the signal and stop it before the infection became uncontrollable. Back in the laboratory, they began analyzing new data. The signal waves were more complex than they had anticipated, and it became clear that it could adapt to any obstacles. "It's learning from us," Luke said, holding his head in his hands. "Every interception attempt makes it stronger." Sarah pondered. What if it's actually not of cosmic origin? Maybe someone on Earth is amplifying it and using it to control people. Luke considered her words. The idea was horrifying yet plausible. If the signal was not foreign but artificially enhanced, then a living person with motives is behind it. "We have to find this someone," he said firmly. "Otherwise, the city will be lost." The following hours were spent tracking short signal pulses spreading through the city's neighborhoods. People under its influence behaved strangely. Sudden mood swings, unnatural movements, uncharacteristic aggression. "It's spreading faster than we thought," Sarah whispered. "And we can't stop it alone." Luke realized that they were on the brink of disaster. Even if they managed to locate the signal's source, its effect on people was already underway and increasing. "Tomorrow, we will find it, and when we do, the real battle begins." They stayed in the laboratory late into the night, watching the graphs, listening to the fractured signal waves trembling in the air. The silence was deceptive, because they knew the influence of the signal never sleeps, and every minute could change someone's life forever. Sarah looked at Luke and whispered, "Luke, we're not ready for what will happen tomorrow." They both nodded silently, understanding that this night was only preparation for the true battle against the evil that had arrived from space and penetrated human consciousness.
Chapter 5. The First Victims. The next day in Chicago began with a strange sense of silence. The city, which usually awoke to the hum of cars and the noise of crowds, looked unnaturally empty that morning. Luke, Harris, and Sarah headed to the downtown area, where the signal had been the strongest over the past few hours. They knew that time was running out. "We need to check the area where Jonathan disappeared," said Luke, holding a tablet displaying the map and signal activity readings. "There could be the first victims who haven't shown outward signs yet." Sarah nodded, trying to suppress her panic. Her hands still trembled from the previous day's exposure to the signal, and she felt a slight tingling at her temples. "Luke, I feel like it's doing something to the city," she whispered. "People are acting strangely, as if something is controlling them." Luke silently nodded, and they moved through the narrow streets where sunlight barely penetrated the fog. At first glance, everything seemed quiet, but the silence was deceptive. The first victim was a local newspaper vendor. Stepping out of his shop, he waved his arms as if trying to push away an invisible space. Luke and Sarah approached, but realized that contact was dangerous. His eyes were empty, and his movements unnatural. "Don't go near him," Luke shouted, feeling a surge of adrenaline. Sarah barely restrained a scream as the man suddenly spun around and lunged toward them. Luke raised the pulsimeter and aimed it at the victim. A brief flash of electricity forced the man to fall, but his consciousness remained under the signal's control. "This is getting worse than we thought," Sarah whispered. "He hasn't completely lost control of his body, but soon he will." Continuing their survey of the area, they found several more people exhibiting similar symptoms: vacant eyes, sudden mood swings, mechanical movements. The signal was not just altering behavior, it was breaking personalities, subjugating both body and mind simultaneously. Luke stopped in front of a small cafe. Inside, he saw another missing colleague, Chris. His face was pale and his gaze empty. "Chris, is that you?" Sarah tried to whisper, her lips barely forming the words. Chris raised his hand and slammed it down on a small table, scaring them away. They stepped back, realizing that contact with him was dangerous. "We can't save them all," Luke said, feeling the weight of responsibility. "But we have to find the source of the signal before it spreads throughout the city." Sarah nodded. She understood that their mission was no longer just research, it had become a fight for the lives and minds of the people. Luke, what if the signal didn't come from just one source? What if there are several? Her voice trembled with fear. Then we have to find them, he replied firmly. Otherwise, the city will lose control forever. They set out for the old observatory on the outskirts of the city. The place seemed abandoned, but it was there that Luke's antenna had picked up the strongest signal the previous day. Along the way, they noticed strange signs. People with vacant stares suddenly changing direction, as if someone was directing their actions. "They're becoming part of something bigger," Sarah whispered, her voice lost in the fog. Upon arriving at the observatory, the first thing they saw were radio waves flickering on old antennas and strange, indecipherable signals on the monitors. Luke connected his laptop and began analyzing the data. "This isn't just a signal from space," he said. "It's an artificially amplified information stream. Someone on Earth is controlling it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The city's people were no longer independent. Their actions and thoughts could be subjected to a foreign mind. "We have to act fast," she said. "Every minute of inaction kills people." Luke nodded and activated their plan. They tracked weak signal pulses, trying to determine the direction from which it originated. But with every passing minute, the number of victims grew. In the observatory, they found the first concrete proof. Footage from city cameras showing people suddenly stopping, staring into emptiness, then walking towards a certain building as if receiving orders. This is like mind control," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. Luke lifted his gaze to the sky. The sun was already setting, leaving the city shrouded in fog. He knew tomorrow would be even worse. Every minute they delayed locating the signal source meant death for people who could still survive. "Tomorrow we'll find it," Luke said, clenching his fists. Sarah and Luke stayed late into the night watching the monitors. They knew one thing: the catastrophe had already begun, and the first victims were only the beginning.
Chapter 6: Contact with the Unknown. The night in Chicago was unnaturally quiet. The city, usually buzzing with life, seemed frozen, and the fog hung low over the streets, softening the glow of streetlights. Luke and Sarah remained in the observatory, intently watching the monitors. The cold light from the screens illuminated their faces, reflecting exhaustion and anxiety. "Luke," she whispered, her hand hovering over the keyboard, "I feel like it's watching us." Luke lifted his head, listening to the silence. His heart raced, but this wasn't the silence of the city, it was something else. Something invisible, penetrating the room, invading their thoughts. "I feel it too," he replied. "Unknown contact. It's the signal, but it feels alive." They examined the latest data together. The signal, which had at first seemed like a passive stream of electromagnetic waves, now reacted to their actions. When Luke switched channels, the signals on the screens shifted in shape, creating strange, almost living patterns. "It's like it wants to say something," Sarah murmured, eyes glued to the monitors. Luke nervously pulled out his tablet, trying to capture the impulses. But the screen flickered, and strange, muffled sounds emanated from the observatory speakers. Whispers at the edge of consciousness. "What is that?" Sarah exclaimed, recoiling. "It's reaching into our minds." "Don't panic," Luke tried to calm her, though he himself felt a cold shiver of fear. "It's contact, and it's dangerous." Suddenly, the room filled with electric sparks, and the monitors began to flicker chaotically. Luke felt a sharp pain in his temples. The signal was attempting to penetrate his consciousness.
Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, yet the impulses still cut through, sending waves of fear and unease. "We have to keep control of our minds," Luke shouted, his hands trembling from tension. "Don't let it manipulate us." They quickly connected a protective module to the laptop, one Luke had developed earlier, hoping to isolate the signal. The effect was only partial. Even through the safeguards, they could hear and feel its presence. "It knows we're here," Sarah whispered, barely audible, "and it's testing us. Probing." Luke looked at her. Her face was pale, eyes wide, yet determination burned within. She had survived the first assault, giving them precious time for their next moves. "We can't stay here too long," Luke said. "We need to locate the signal's source and understand what it wants." They put on specialized sensory helmets that recorded neural activity and connected them to the observatory systems. The signal reacted to every movement, forming spirals and pulsing lines on the screens that resembled living structures. "It's studying our thought patterns," Sarah said, sensing the signal digging into our subconscious. "And the more we resist, the harder it attacks." Luke realized they were on the edge. If they didn't find a way to pinpoint the source, the signal could penetrate deeper, and they would become its next victims. "We're taking a risk, but there's no other way," he said firmly. "We need direct contact using the antenna. It's the only chance." Sarah nodded, gathering the data and checking the protective helmets. They connected the antenna to the laptop, and the signal immediately changed its structure, as if it knew that they had found a path to it. On the monitors appeared a strange, flickering form, resembling a human silhouette, yet alien, extraterrestrial. The whispering grew louder, words forming into phrases that could be understood. "Humans, listen," the voice intoned, low and mechanical, yet intelligent. "You must not interfere." "We cannot let you control people," Luke shouted, his heart pounding. "We have to stop you before it's too late." The signal instantly accelerated its pulses, filling the observatory with light and noise. Luke and Sarah held on to their helmets, feeling waves of pain and fear, knowing that the outcome of this contact could decide the lives of countless people in the city. Suddenly, the signal stopped, and the room plunged into silence. Luke and Sarah breathed deeply, feeling relief, but understanding that the contact was far from over. "That was just the first test," Luke said. "It knows we're here, and it's waiting for the next move." Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining with resolution. "Next time, we won't just defend. We'll confront it. And we'll find out what it wants from us." They left the observatory for the night, carefully shutting down all systems. The city slept, but the shadow of the signal lingered over it, a reminder that the danger was only beginning. Luke and Sarah knew one thing: tomorrow the contact would be even closer, and how they prepared would determine not only their survival, but the fate of thousands.